Andy. Now, my next guest is a writer, speaker and mental health campaigner who's just released her new book, which aims to teach teenagers on how to stay emotionally safe online and, at the same time, how to make the most of the internet. Well, Natasha, Devon is here. I mean, you have to walk that really delicate tightrope in this book, don't you, which is the internet isn't all bad, so let's not, as parents, panic about it all the time and think, ban it, ban it, ban it. But at the same time, instill enough cynicism in your children that they don't believe everything they see.
That's exactly right. There is actually a report that came out from Ofcom a couple of weeks ago that showed that it's all about literacy. If children and young people have the skills that they need to be able to spot fake news, to know what to do if they think they're being groomed or radicalised, they can then get the benefits of the internet. And there are so many benefits to social media, which is rarely talked about. But it is here and it's here to stay. So I think this attitude that many of the adults that I've spoken to of life was so much better without it, let's just pretend it doesn't exist, isn't particularly helpful.
Yeah, and sort of just berate your children, which is a natural... Because you're not doing it, you sort of... It's a slightly scary world, isn't it? So, you know, YouTube and so on, all the algorithms, we hear so much about it. What are some of your... and it's aimed at teens, but I was saying that I think it's probably even for pre-teens a little bit, you know, sort of year 6, 7, just before they... You know, those early stages when they're just getting their phones and they're just getting their devices and they're having a bit more independence. What are your tips for parents at that stage in how to have those conversations about pornography, about all the things? All the surveys say, you've got some stats in here that, you know, 90-odd% of 11 to 16-year-olds will eventually have seen something terribly graphic.
That's right. And that's something to bear in mind, that your child is only as safe as the least safe child in their class when it comes to technology. Because what the research shows is that with, for example, pornography, they're shown it in the playground by somebody who's usually trying to gross them out or think that it's funny. But in terms of my tips for parents and grandparents, there's a chapter in the book about teaching up. And if you are a little bit scared yourself because you're not familiar with the technology, you know, we've all lived through this revolution, then you can ask the child in your life, show me how it works. You're learning, you're bonding, and they feel that you're coming to the conversation with curiosity and respect, which will make them trust you.
Yeah, because also, do you recognise when you speak to lots of young people about their internet usage, that they sort of know it's slightly wrong, and therefore, even if their parent asks them, they're slightly afraid of being told off, that they know they shouldn't have been on it, and so they're already slightly defensive anyway, so that conversation immediately becomes a little bit rigid.
It's interesting, actually. So one of the exercises that I do when I visit schools and colleges is I ask teenagers what's in your stress buckets. And
that's a nice question.
Yeah, and they always say academic stuff first, exams, homework, and they usually put social media last on their list, if it comes up at all. When I ask parents, what do you think is in your teenage child's stress bucket, they put social media at the top. So it's the same list but inverted. And I actually think the truth is somewhere in between. I think children and young people underestimate the impact it's having on them, and their parents tend to overestimate slightly.
I think that's probably true, and I think it's because we think academic will sort itself out. That's fine, it's just school, we all did it. Because the unfamiliar territory is that sort of whole sort of social media thing. And what kind of, do you have sort of hard and fast rules, like about phones in bedrooms and things like that, which obviously teenagers won't like? Do you think that there is a room for... Because I suppose the dilemma for parents and grandparents is trust versus damage limitation. That's how I see it. It's like, how far do I go to make him hate me, my child hate me, because I'm taking something away that they want, that all their mates have got? But at the same time, you've got to show a level of trust and self-responsibility and self-monitoring. Yeah.
Well, you're trying to teach them self-regulation as well, because ultimately you won't always be there.
Exactly.
One of the tips in the book is about a digital sunset. So it's about an hour before they want to go to bed. They reduce their contact with technology and do something that's going to relax them enough so that they can get a good night's sleep. Sleep is so essential to mental health and the quality of sleep as well as the quantity. That's a really good habit for them to get into. But for parents and grandparents, I would also say practice what you preach. If you have a rule of no phones at the dinner table, don't bring your phone to the dinner table. Don't let them see you on your phone right before bed or when you're meant to be doing a family activity.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because if you're working, you're self-employed, you work from home, often those office hours do bleed out into the evening, and then you're on your phone answering emails. But yeah, I suppose you're right, we've got to find a way to sort of show them that we're not doing those bad habits either. Your own sort of desire desire to write things like this comes from your own mental health journey, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I visit an average of 3 schools or colleges per week, mainly here in the UK. And the idea behind doing that came because I have a diagnosis of an anxiety disorder. And it crept up on me because when I was young, we weren't taught about mental health in the way that children are today. So I didn't recognise the signs and symptoms in myself. So I wanted to have a more universally relevant conversation with young people. So what I do is I deliver talks in schools, but I also do research with teenagers. And that's where the idea from this book came from, because they were saying all of our education around social media, we're just being told, don't do it. And what we want is some really granular, practical advice on how to navigate the online world.
Yeah, well, it is brilliant because I've flicked through it and it's like really easy to read. And I just found that, you know, you sort of talk in a language that is very accessible and it's not scary and it's not off-putting. It's just look, there are some great role models out there, and you even give some examples of great, interesting hip-hop artists who you think are really cool and speak well about lots of life issues. So it's not sort of, you know, just follow, you know, sort of academics, you know, we're not saying that. You know, follow cool people, but just follow the right ones.
And think of your online world as like you're a curator of an art gallery and you're in charge of what's on the walls.
Yeah. Fantastic. It's a really helpful book. Thank you so much for writing it. You know, I think it's definitely needed. Natasha's book, Clicks, How to Be Your Best Self Online, is out now. Now, after the break, why this £7 bottle of rosemary oil could help regrow your